And by that I mean there are no longer any humane limits. Nothing is impossible. Millions of human beings can be killed.
He helped build a brutal empire, then vanished before judgment could touch him. But what happens to the family left behind when the world turns against their name? Heinrich Himmler is gone, but his shadow is just getting started, and it's about to swallow his own blood. May 1945, Germany is collapsing, cities in ruins, leaders hunted like ghosts. Himmler, once one of the most feared men in Nazi Germany, is now running for his life. Disguised as a low-ranking sergeant, he slips through northern Germany with a few loyal aides, hoping no one looks too closely. But how long can a man like that stay hidden? On May 22nd, British soldiers stop the group near Bremervorde.
Himmler was in our house. I've seen him personally. My dad was taken in 1935. That was the first when they started taking these people to Siberia and a labor camp. And Stalin wanted to have free workers, not paid workers. And there were thousands of people. My dad came back. He was lucky from thousands that he came back after 6 years.
A routine check, until it isn't. His identity is exposed, and suddenly the hunter becomes the captured. Taken to Lüneburg, he faces interrogation, but he has one last move. The very next day, during a medical exam, Himmler bites into a hidden cyanide capsule and dies instantly. No trial, no answers, just silence. His body? Buried in an unmarked grave, as if the earth itself wanted to erase him. But while his story ends there, another begins, one far messier, far more personal. His wife Margarete and daughter Gudrun are already on the run. As Allied forces close in, they flee Bavaria, racing south toward Italy, chasing rumors of safety. Could they escape the fallout of his crimes? On May 21st, just one day before Himmler is caught, they're stopped by American troops near Bolzano. The timing feels almost unreal. Both are arrested and thrown into Allied custody, their lives flipping overnight.
He asked, is here in this village a man that came back from Siberia labor camp? And then she said, yeah, my dad. And Dad was very pleased that he could tell him all about it. That's where Himmler sat with my dad and talked about my dad's experience in Siberia.
Gudrun is just 16, once known as Poopy, her father's adored child, smiling beside him in carefully staged photos. But now, she's no longer protected. To the Allies, she's simply the daughter of one of the most feared men in Europe. The interrogations begin, and they don't stop. Camp to camp, across Italy, France, and Germany, the questions keep coming. What do they know? What was hidden? Were their secret networks still out there? The Allies want answers, especially as the Nuremberg trials unfold in late 1945. Margarete and Gudrun aren't charged, but they're pulled in as witnesses. Margarete appears cold, controlled, but there's bitterness under the surface. She claims she knew nothing about her husband's political work, insisting she lived quietly, focused only on home and family. But is that believable? Old letters from the 1930s tell a different story, one of support, privilege, and quiet agreement with the system that gave them everything. Gudrun reacts very differently and far more openly. Reports say she shows hostility toward her interrogators, refusing to bend. She defends her father without hesitation, calling him a great man. Even now, after everything, she won't let go. Is it loyalty or something deeper? By late 1946, the Allies make their decision. Neither woman is seen as a direct threat. They're released and sent back to Germany. But what kind of life is waiting for them? Their home is gone, their reputation destroyed, and their name toxic. They return to a country that doesn't forget and definitely doesn't forgive. And the nightmare doesn't end there. After 1947, Margarete and Gudrun try to rebuild in a Germany that watches them closely. Their property in Gumd is seized, their finances locked down. They settle quietly near Munich, surviving on small pensions and help from old connections who haven't forgotten their loyalty. But can you ever truly start over with a name like Himmler?
Then comes denazification.
Dieses personifizierte Böse in der Familie, Heinrich Himmler, der wirklich alles Böse auf sich vereinigt hat, sodass alle anderen ganz locker in seinem Schatten verschwinden konnten und automatisch eigentlich als Und ich denke mal, dass, also nicht nur einerseits war es so, dass mein Vater sehr früh, sehr offen gesprochen hat über die familiäre Konstellation, über die Tatsache, dass Heinrich Himmler sein Onkel war, sein Patenonkel sogar, und dass er schreckliche Verbrechen begangen hat und
The system designed to sort guilt from innocence. Margarete's past is dragged back into the spotlight again and again. In 1951, she's labeled a Mitläuferin, a follower, one of the least severe categories. It sounds like a pass, but is it really? Because new evidence starts to surface. Records linking her to Nazi welfare groups, letters revealing her deep ideological ties to her husband. The picture becomes harder to ignore and far more complicated. So the question grows louder. Was Margarete just standing beside power or quietly supporting everything it stood for? The story doesn't calm down. It tightens its grip. Just when Margarete thought the worst was over, everything snaps back into motion. January 1953, her case is reopened again, and this time the verdict hits harder. The British authorities upgrade her classification to Belastete, Category 2. Not just a bystander anymore. Now she's labeled an activist or profiteer.
in Erinnerung gehabt. Und es war eigentlich auch so, dass meine Schwester und ich als Kinder immer dieses Gefühl hatten, so wie gut, dass wir nur Mädchen sind in der Familie, dann wird der Name Himmler irgendwann aussterben bei uns. Also es war für uns wichtig, dass der irgendwann verschwindet aus der Familie, dass der...
That single decision changes everything. She's ordered into 30 days of forced work, stripped of her right to vote, and even her pension is taken away. In post-war Germany, that's a public fall from what little she had left. The humiliation burns, and she doesn't stay quiet about it. Margarete fires off letters, calling herself a victim of Allied hatred, insisting she was nothing more than a wife and mother. But that version of her story starts to crack under pressure. Historians later uncover her wartime diaries, and they tell a completely different story. Page after page shows admiration for Hitler and open contempt for anyone who doubted the regime. So which version is real? The quiet homemaker or the loyal believer hiding in plain sight? Meanwhile, Gudrun is stepping into adulthood, but she's carrying something heavy with her. Now in her early 20s, she refuses to let go of her father's image. The world sees a criminal. She sees something else entirely. I will never believe he did anything wrong, she says, and she means it. That belief doesn't fade, it hardens. It becomes the core of who she is. How do you build a future when your past is something most people want erased? By the mid-1950s, she tries to blend in. Gudrun works as a dressmaker, then later as a secretary in Munich. Sometimes she even changes her surname, hoping to slip under the radar. But it's never that simple. People remember. They always remember. And while she moves through everyday life on the surface, something else is happening behind the scenes. In 1952, she reconnects with families tied to the SS. Quiet gatherings begin. Private rooms, closed doors, shared memories of a fallen regime. These aren't just reunions. They're spaces where the past refuses to die. The 1950s become a strange kind of silence for the Himmlers. West Germany is rebuilding fast, looking forward, trying to forget, but their name won't let them disappear. In public, they act like any other struggling family. In private, they remain tied to a legacy that won't loosen its grip. Can you ever truly move on if you don't believe anything needed to change? Then the 1960s arrive, and Gudrun takes another step deeper into a complicated world. Now known as Gudrun Burwitz after marrying engineer Wolf-Dieter Burwitz in 1951, she appeared settled. 2 children, a home near Munich, a normal life on the outside. But behind closed doors, her loyalty hasn't shifted at all. When West Germany's intelligence agency, the BND, starts hiring, she quietly steps in. Between 1961 and 1963, working under a different name, she's inside the system itself. Years later, the agency confirms it. Heinrich Himmler's daughter was on their payroll during the Cold War. How does that even happen?
By the mid-1950s, she tries to blend in. Gudrun works as a dressmaker, then later as a secretary in Munich. Sometimes she even changes her surname, hoping to slip under the radar. But it's never that simple. People remember. They always remember. And while she moves through everyday life on the surface, something else is happening behind the scenes. In 1952, she reconnects with families tied to the SS. Quiet gatherings begin. Private rooms, closed doors, shared memories of a fallen regime. These aren't just reunions, they're spaces where the past refuses to die. The 1950s become a strange kind of silence for the Himmlers. West Germany is rebuilding fast, looking forward, trying to forget. But their name won't let them disappear. In public, they act like any other struggling family. In private, they remain tied to a legacy that won't loosen its grip. Can you ever truly move on if you don't believe anything needed to change? Then the 1960s arrive, and Gudrun takes another step deeper into a complicated world. Now known as Gudrun Burwitz after marrying engineer Wolf-Dieter Burwitz in 1951, she appears settled. 2 children, a home near Munich, a normal life on the outside. But behind closed doors, her loyalty hasn't shifted at all. When West Germany's intelligence agency, the BND, starts hiring, she quietly steps in. Between 1961 and 1963, working under a different name, she's inside the system itself. Years later, the agency confirms it. Heinrich Himmler's daughter was on their payroll during the Cold War. How does that even happen? Some see it as proof that old networks never really disappeared, that they simply adapted and blended in. Others argue she was just another German trying to survive in uncertain times. But one thing is clear, her connection to the past is still alive, still shaping her path. And when she leaves the BND, that connection only grows stronger. Gudrun becomes more active in circles that refuse to let history settle. Across the 1950s and 1960s, former SS members and their families begin organizing quietly. One group stands out, Stille Hilfe, or Silent Help. On paper, it's a charity supporting prisoners of war and detainees, but in reality, it becomes a lifeline for convicted Nazis, raising money, offering support, and keeping old loyalties alive in the shadows. So the question gets darker. Was Gudrun just honoring her family, or helping rebuild something the world thought had already been buried?
By the 1970s, Gudrun Burwitz isn't hiding anymore. She's stepping into the spotlight of a world most people want buried. She becomes one of the most visible faces tied to former SS networks, attending reunions filled with aging officers, writing letters to convicted war criminals, and raising money for their families. And even though she avoids the media, her beliefs aren't a mystery. She openly defends her father, calling him a great man who had done good things for Germany. No hesitation, no doubt. But how does someone hold on to that belief when the world sees something so different? She accuses Allied historians of twisting the truth, rejecting everything written about the crimes of the regime. For years, she refuses interviews, avoids cameras, yet when rare photos surface, they send chills through the public. There she is, older now, calm, even smiling, standing among former SS veterans as if nothing had changed. It's not loud denial, it's quieter, colder, and somehow more unsettling. Authorities are aware, watching from a distance, but no charges come. The group she supports, Stille Hilfe, operates in a legal gray zone, presented as charity, but quietly helping convicted figures and fugitives like Klaus Barbie. Where is the line between aid and allegiance? Through the 1990s and into the 2000s, Gudrun stays active, moving quietly through far-right circles, offering support, keeping connections alive. She never apologizes. She never distances herself. And when she dies in Munich on May 24, 2018 at 88 years old, she leaves behind a legacy just as defiant as the one she protected. To some, she remains a symbol, the daughter of the SS, a reminder that the past didn't disappear, it adapted and lingered. But not every branch of the Himmler family followed that path, and that's where the story takes a sharp turn. Heinrich's brothers faced their own fates in the aftermath of collapse. Gebhard, the eldest, is detained after the war, but eventually classified as a follower, not a key figure. He's released, rebuilds his life in Munich, works in industry, even represents a cultural office connected to Afghanistan in the 1950s. He lives quietly and dies in 1982, rarely speaking about the brother whose name shaped his life. Silence becomes his shield.
Ernst Hermann Himmler never gets that chance. Before the war ends, he's already pulled into the chaos. Once a journalist and radio executive, he had joined the Nazi Party early and later fights with the Volkssturm during Berlin's final defense. On May 2, 1945, just days before surrender, he's killed as Soviet troops take the city.
His story ends in the ruins, one more life swallowed by the collapse. Then, decades later, something unexpected happens. A new voice emerges from within the same family, but it doesn't echo loyalty, it challenges it. Katrin Himmler, born in 1967, grows up carrying a name that makes people uneasy. At first, she avoids it, keeps her distance. But as she gets older, she makes a different choice. She confronts it head-on. Trained as a political scientist, she begins digging into her family's past, asking the questions others refuse to face. What created a man like Heinrich Himmler? And could understanding it help prevent something like it from happening again? In 2005, she publishes The Himmler Brothers, a German family history, a detailed, unflinching look at Heinrich, Gebhard, and Ernst. The book doesn't try to erase guilt or soften reality. Instead, it exposes it. She shows how an ordinary middle-class family, shaped by ambition and nationalism, could produce one of history's most infamous figures. It's not about excuses, it's about clarity, and that honesty sets her apart. In interviews, Katrin makes her stance clear. "I cannot change the past," she says, "but I can decide how to live with it." That single idea draws a line through generations, between denial and responsibility, between silence and truth. So why did some cling to the past, while others chose to confront it? Even today, the Himmlerism carries weight. In 2014, newly discovered letters and diaries from Heinrich Himmler shake historians again. The documents reveal a disturbing contrast, a man writing tender notes to his wife and daughter while overseeing deportations and mass killings at the same time. That contradiction forces an uncomfortable question: how can ordinary behavior exist alongside unimaginable actions? The story of the Himmler family isn't just about one man, it's about what lingers after power falls. Gudrun defended the legacy without regret. Katrin faced it with honesty. Two paths from the same name leading in completely different directions. And that leaves one final question. When history leaves a mark this deep, what truly matters more? Protecting the past or confronting it so it never repeats?
Wie wir am 30. Juni gezögert haben, die befohlene Pflicht zu tun und Kameraden, die sich verfehlt hatten, an die Wand zu stellen und zu erschießen. Wie wir darüber niemals gesprochen haben und sprechen werden. Das war so eine Gott sei Dank in uns wohnende Takt. Geschauert, und jeder war sich klar, dass es das nächste Mal wieder tun würde, wenn es befohlen wird und wenn es notwendig ist. Die Ausrottung des jüdischen Volkes.